There is a protein in your muscle cells that stays out of sight until something goes wrong. Most of the time it sits folded in the background, doing quiet maintenance. Then a stressor arrives, a fever, a burn, a hard set taken well past failure, and its numbers climb. Biologists call this family the heat shock proteins, because the first time anyone noticed them, heat was the trigger. That was 1962. An Italian geneticist named Ferruccio Ritosa was studying the salivary glands of fruit flies, and he noticed that when the glands were warmed, specific regions of the chromosomes swelled into visible puffs. Something was being switched on by temperature alone. It took another decade to work out that the puffs were the cell rapidly manufacturing a set of defensive proteins, and longer still to realize that nearly everything alive does the same thing. Bacteria, yeast, plants, mice, and us, using machinery so old it predates the split between animals and fungi. When a mechanism has been conserved for that many hundreds of millions of years, it is usually because it does one important job very well. That deep age is the first clue to what these proteins are actually for. It is not the job the fitness internet has assigned them. The claim, as it currently circulates, is clean and appealing. You finish training. You step into a sauna set to around 180 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat triggers a wave of heat shock proteins. Those proteins force your damaged fibers to rebuild thicker than before, and you walk out with muscle you never had to eat for. Free hypertrophy, growth without the surplus. The word people reach for is glitch, as though the body left a door unlocked and somebody finally found it. I have watched this idea travel for a few years now. I want to walk through what is actually underneath it, because the real mechanism is more interesting than the version being sold, and it points somewhere genuinely useful, just not where the claim is pointing. And if you would rather stop guessing and follow a plan that builds muscle the way the research actually supports, that is exactly what my lean bulking program is built for. The full plan is linked in the description below, and it is the place to start. Start with what heat shock proteins do. They are chaperones. When a protein inside a cell gets stressed, heated, oxidized, mechanically strained, it can start to lose its shape, and a misfolded protein is worse than a missing one because it clumps together with others and gums up everything nearby. Heat shock proteins bind to these unstable proteins before they can aggregate, and they hold newly built proteins steady until those settle into the correct shape. Material that is too far gone, they tag and escort off to be recycled. Inside a working muscle fiber, this is not an occasional service. It is constant, because contraction is a chemically violent process, and every hard session leaves a mess of strained and half-broken proteins behind. So when you heat a muscle, you raise the level of these repair and protection molecules. That part is not really in dispute. A study published in 2023 in the American Journal of Physiology took resistance-trained people, had them lift, and then exposed them to whole-body heat. The heated sessions showed higher expression of the HSP70 family and more activation of the ActmTOR cascade, the signaling pathway most tied to muscle growth, than lifting alone did. On paper, that is exactly the story the sauna claim wants to tell. Heat went in, and growth signaling went up. The problem is everything standing around that sentence. The same researchers were careful to note that the responses were, in their words, notably variable. Some subjects showed the effect clearly, others barely moved. And switching on a growth pathway for a few hours is a very different thing from adding measurable muscle across weeks, which is the only outcome anyone actually trains for. The signaling is the invitation. It is not the meal. Then there is the study that tends to get left out of the story. In 2020, a group led by Cass Fuchs at Maastricht University measured the thing that actually matters, which is not signaling, but muscle protein synthesis, the real rate at which the body assembles new muscle protein after resistance exercise, with and without hot water immersion. If heat delivered anything like free growth, this is exactly where it would appear. It did not. The heated legs built protein at the same rate as the unheated ones. The mechanism that was supposed to be the entire point simply was not there once someone measured the output instead of the upstream signal. That is the shape of the honest literature. Heat stress reliably raises heat shock proteins. It nudges growth-related signaling in a fairly repeatable way. And then, when researchers follow the chain all the way to new tissue in trained humans, the effect shrinks, scatters, and becomes easy to lose in the noise. There is even a paper from 2007 by Freire and Locke carrying the flat title, "Heat Stress Inhibits Skeletal Muscle Hypertrophy," because in their rat model, the timing of the heat worked against growth rather than for it. The real picture is ambiguous, and ambiguity does not carry a thumbnail, so in the retelling the ambiguity quietly disappears. But I said the mechanism points somewhere useful, and it does. You only have to turn the question around. The useful question is not what heat does for building muscle, it is what heat does for keeping it. Because on that side, the evidence stops being ambiguous. Heat shock proteins are, underneath everything, a defense system. Their strongest and most repeatable effect in muscle is not making a fiber larger, it is protecting a fiber that would otherwise waste away. This shows up again and again in the disuse models. Immobilize a limb, a cast, a suspended hind limb, a stretch of enforced rest, and muscle begins to atrophy almost immediately because the body is efficient and stops maintaining tissue it believes it no longer needs. Raise heat shock proteins before or during that window, and the loss slows. The chaperones hold the machinery together through the exact period when the body is trying to take it apart. They work on the breakdown side of the ledger, not the building side. Turned that way, the whole thing suddenly matters to a different person. Think about the moments when a lifter loses muscle they had already earned. An injury pulls you out of the gym for 6 weeks. A bad flu flattens you for 10 days. You travel for a stretch with no equipment and no routine, or a cranky joint forces an unplanned deload. In each of these, the enemy is not slow growth, it is active loss, the body quietly dismantling what you built. This, by the way, is the same fear underneath all the anxiety about cardio while bulking. The worry that a few easy sessions on the bike will eat into hard-won size. That particular fear is usually overblown, but the instinct beneath it is sound. Protecting existing muscle is a real goal, and a separate one from adding new muscle, and almost every piece of training advice only ever addresses the second. This is the part my lean bulking program is built around: the surplus and training that add the muscle, and the recovery that keeps you from losing it. If you want that entire system in one place instead of stitching it together yourself, go to the link in the description and get it now. Heat is a reasonable tool for the first, not a miraculous one, a reasonable one. If you are stuck in a cast and cannot load the muscle at all, then raising heat shock proteins through sauna use or warm water immersion is one of the few levers still available to you, and it might slow the bleed. The evidence for that use is meaningfully stronger than the evidence for free growth, and hardly anyone presents it that way, because protecting muscle you already have is a duller promise than gaining muscle out of thin air. None of this removes the ordinary, unglamorous machinery of getting bigger. If the goal is more muscle, the surplus still has to be there. The entire reason anyone studies how to lean bulk is that new tissue costs energy and protein to assemble, and no amount of heat conjures either from nothing. The training stimulus still has to be there too, which is what an actual hypertrophy workout routine supplies, and a sauna never will. Heat sits beside those things at the very best. It is a modifier at the margins, and the margins are the honest place to keep it. So if you are serious about getting this right, do not leave it to chance. My complete lean bulking program lays out the exact surplus, the exact hypertrophy training, and the recovery that holds it all together, week by week. Click the link in the description and start building today. There is one more thing worth stating plainly, because a sauna is not a neutral little room. 180 degrees puts a genuine load on the cardiovascular system, and you tend to walk in already low on fluid, with your heart rate still up from training. Heat lowers blood pressure, sometimes sharply, and people do faint. If you have any heart condition, if you have been drinking, if you feel at all lightheaded, the sauna straight after a hard session is not the place to test yourself. Drink first. Keep the early sessions short. Treat it as what it honestly is, which is a mild stressor with a modest and fairly specific benefit, rather than a cheat code. So the glitch turns out not to be a glitch. There was never an unlocked door, only an ancient defense system, doing exactly what a defense system is built to do, wrapped in a layer of marketing that repainted defense as offense because offense sells better. The heat shock response is real and elegant, and it has been keeping cells alive since long before cells had much of a nucleus to speak of. What it cannot do is let you skip the food and the training. Where it earns a place is the stretch, when you are only trying not to lose ground, and that is the single job the evidence is actually willing to hand it.